Sir Roger, thank you for calling me. I'd like to thank all honourable members for yet another constructive and interesting debate. It's been very, very well informed and in some depth on all sides, and the question of who can take part in this referendum is clearly vitally important. I'll say something on the amendments tabled today, but first I want to say a few words about why the general principle which underpins the bill sets out the entitlement to vote as it does. I will try to be brisk as well, Sir Roger, because I want to leave a few moments for the SNP front bench to come back at the end of this if I can. As a vote of national importance, the bill starts with the parliamentary franchise. It extends it to Commonwealth citizens in Gibraltar, and I'll say a little bit more about that in the next group, this debate, and to members of the House of Lords who do not vote in general elections. There have been suggestions that one franchise or another would favour one result or another. And even though the whip in me finds this strangely appealing, I don't think it would be either principled or right to change the franchise to try and get a certain result. Instead, we should follow the precedent set in 1975 and again in 2011, when UK-wide votes on membership of the EEC and the alternative vote were put to the parliamentary franchise. This is the franchise which we use for big questions that will determine the future of our nation, not just for referendums, but for who should form the government and lead the country. And I believe it is right that we apply it again here. Honourable members for Gordon and Ilford South tabled a number of amendments seeking to use the local election franchise rather than the parliamentary one. Their aim, I think, is to add EU citizens resident in the UK. The Labour front bench made some helpful comments opposing this point, I think, in principle. Now, of course, a few EU citizens have long been able to vote in UK parliamentary elections. Citizens of Malta, Cyprus and Ireland are already able to vote if they are resident in the UK because of our historical connections to these countries and their citizens. But for the rest of the EU, British citizens living abroad do not have voting rights in their national elections. The only exceptions I'm aware of are in Ireland, where voting rights here are reciprocated, and to the upper chamber of Slovenia's parliament, Sir Roger, a right which I suspect not many people here knew they had, and I doubt that anyone's going to be dashing over there to set up residence in Slovenia, but if they do, they are of course welcome to vote when they get there. And I'm not aware of any national referendum in the EU that allowed citizens from other member states to take part. British citizens were not entitled. I'll happily vote.
I'm grateful to the Minister for giving way. Isn't this the crucial point, rather than arguments about ancestry or length of residence? Isn't it the case that in any recent referendum on a European question held by a member state, whether that was the Austrian referendum on accession in 1994, whether that's the referenda held more recently in France and the Netherlands, or the frequent referenda held in Ireland on various EU treaty changes, in all of those cases, residents from elsewhere in the EU have not been given the vote in those referenda.
Well, Sir Roger, the honourable gentleman is absolutely right, and it would be lopsided indeed, I think, if we were to take a different approach for our nationals than has been done elsewhere in the EU. So, as I said, British citizens were not entitled to vote in the Dutch or French referendums in 2005, further to his point, for example. And finally, switching from the parliamentary to the local elections franchise would block British citizens living abroad from voting at all, because they are not entitled to vote at local elections. So the net effect of these amendments will be to deny British citizens living abroad the right to vote on their own country's future, while giving that right to other Europeans who are living here but have chosen not to become citizens. This strikes me as fundamentally unfair and inequitable, and I hope the honourable gentleman will accordingly withdraw their amendments when the time comes. We've also heard about the need to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote for the first time in a UK-wide poll. There are a number of amendments to this effect in the names of the honourable members for Camberwell and Peckham and Gordon and North East Fife. Now, this is a referendum about an issue of huge national significance, and the starting point for determining who is entitled to vote must therefore be the franchise for parliamentary elections. Honourable members will be aware that the voting age for parliamentary elections is set at 18. Voting age was 18 in the 1975 referendum on EC membership and the 2011 alternative vote referendum. And let's not forget, as a number of honourable members on all sides have pointed out, that the voting age in most democracies, including most member states in the EU, is also 18. Only Austria in the EU currently allows voting at 16, although we've heard that Scotland is now heading in that direction, and I think they are hours away from extending their franchise for Holyrood elections as well, as is indeed their devolved and democratic right, and I salute their ability to do that. Honourable members will have pointed to the precedent of the Scottish independence referendum, and that was of course based on the devolved right, as we have heard. But it's also right, therefore, that decisions about the franchise for elections and referendums that take place throughout the United Kingdom should be taken by this Parliament in the same way as decisions taken for the franchise for elections to Holyrood are taken by the Holyrood Parliament. I can manage one more intervention, then I must leave space for his own front bench, but I'll happily give way.
Thank the Minister for giving way. We do of course recognise that this Parliament will take a decision, but could the Minister explain why he's so keen to follow the example set by other EU countries that so many of his colleagues want to cut us off from, but he won't follow the example of the country that his colleagues
Well, Sir Roger, I think I would refer to the comments made by the Labour front bench, which is that there is a degree of symmetry here. There is I think it would be bizarre indeed for us to give rights to people when I think in fact it was my honourable friend for Torbay who pointed out that it would be bizarre to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in an issue of this kind of national importance when they cannot vote on who collects the bins in their local council. This is something which needs to be done on a broader basis. I'll come on to that point a little bit more in a minute. Honourable members have also said that young people are engaged and politically active. That is absolutely true. But it's also true of many 15-year-olds, and not true for some 50-year-olds. Political engagement is not a strong enough justification in and of itself on its own for giving or denying the vote. Another argument we've heard is that people can marry or join the army at 16, and there have been a series of other different activities that can or cannot be done at 16, 17, 18 or indeed 21. I think there were some examples for driving steam tractors or whatever it might be. The important thing is, I think we have in this country always viewed attaining adulthood, attaining majority, as a process rather than an event. It is not something which is neat. I don't think it can be neat. I think it varies from person to person and by activity to activity. And if you want to go into the level, if you want to compare different activities that can be done, on the list which we've heard referred to on the parliamentary website about things that are allowed to be done when you're 16, 17, 18 or otherwise, there's body piercing, Sir Roger. Body piercing and having a tattoo at 18, I don't think that these are necessarily fruitful or relevant comparisons to make. We need to accept that this is something which is a process, not an event, and is therefore tricky to do. Now, a number of my colleagues have made points saying that they agree with the principle, they are sympathetic at least, to the principle of votes at 16, but are concerned that it should be done just for this election. I must say I agree with that point. Members for Warwick and Leamington, Norwich North, Colchester, South Suffolk, Eastleigh, Torbay, Bath, many of them felt the same way about this and said, look, this is an important decision, but it needs to be taken for the franchise as a whole rather than for an individual election. I believe that is right. I do not believe that this bill is the right place to make significant changes to the franchise. Very briefly, and then I must make progress, otherwise...
Isn't it reasonably the case that unless the Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Government, unless the Scottish First Minister at the time had legislated to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in the Scottish referendum, the current Scottish administration wouldn't be in a position to legislate for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote in next year's Scottish election. Isn't it time to start the process?
Well, I'm coming on to the timing of this in a minute, if the Honourable Gentleman will allow, because while I don't think this bill is the right place to make significant changes to the franchise, the debate on the voting age is an important one. The Prime Minister himself has said he thinks it's right it should take place. But making a change of this scale for a single specific vote will simply invite criticism that we are choosing a franchise which has been deliberately skewed for low and partisan party political advantage. Far better to hold the debate when the long-term question of votes for 16 and 17-year-olds at all future elections can be properly and soberly debated. And a moment's glance at the Conservative Party's election manifesto, something which I'm sure is bedtime reading for everybody on the other side of the House, will show that there should be opportunities to do just that during the course of this Parliament. I now move on to amendments moved by my honourable learned friend, the member for Sleaford and North Hykeham or North Hickham? I'm not sure. North Hykeham. I apologise to his constituents if I mispronounced his constituency name, who asked why the bill does not enfranchise Irish citizens resident in Gibraltar. I've got to say to him, it is actually at the moment extremely hard to identify Irish citizens in Gibraltar on their voting register. It's not something that's currently done and would be hard to do. We do not currently, at present, have agreement from the government of Gibraltar to do this because it would clearly impose duties and work on them. It's also true that no one is quite sure how many Irish citizens there are in Gibraltar, although most estimates are pretty low. However, I can promise him that we are already discussing this with the government of Gibraltar, and while I can't predict what the outcome will be, we are discussing it in some depth and will continue to do so on this point. He also asked about the definition of Commonwealth citizens, and for the purposes of elections, Schedule 3 to the British Nationality Act sets out the list of relevant countries. There are two which are not currently members of the Commonwealth, and it's citizens of those countries that would be affected by the Honourable Member's amendment. The first is the Gambia, which withdrew from the Commonwealth in October 2013. The government has not yet removed the Gambia from the list of countries in Schedule 3, but will do so at the next suitable opportunity. Once the government has made this change, Gambian citizens will no longer have Commonwealth voting rights. Crucially, the second is Zimbabwe, which left the Commonwealth in 2003. At the time, the government made the decision to maintain Commonwealth rights for Zimbabwean nationals. This was based on the view that Zimbabwean people should not be punished for the actions of the government that the UK did not consider democratically elected. Given our serious concerns over the 2013 elections in that country, this view remains. I come now to Amendment 52, EU Votes for Life, the Honourable Member for Ilford South. I think he's trying to be helpful because he has tried to table an amendment which is all closely in line with my own party's manifesto, for which I thank him. I'm not sure how his own front bench feels about this, but he hasn't let that stop him, and I salute his courage and determination. However, I'm afraid that I'm now hoist on my own petard, Sir Roger, because having made the argument about 16 and 17-year-old voting and saying this is the wrong bill in which to do this, I really must apply by my own logic that to this point. However, and again I can make him the same assurance which I made to my honourable friends, including I think the honourable lady from Totnes, who was worried on 16 and 17-year-old votes that we will be pushing this item into the long grass. There will be opportunities in this session of Parliament to vote on this, because we will be bringing forward our own bill for Votes for Life, which will apply to all franchises, to make sure that people who are British citizens, who are currently living abroad, who are not currently able to vote and exercise their democratic rights, even though they are citizens of this country, will be able to do so. And at that stage, I look forward to his support, if not that, from his own front bench on this very, very important issue.
Yeah.